Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sadashivasamārambhām Shankarācārya-madhyamām Asmadācārya-paryantāം Vande Guruparamparaam Shrutismriti-purāṇānaam Ālayam Karuణālayam Namāmi Bhagavatpāda Shankaram Lokashankaram Sadatmadhyāna-niratam Vishayebhyah Parāṅmukham Naumi Shastreshu Nishnatam Chandrashekhara Bharati. Om. Page number 13, verse 17, the last line. Etadrisha vichara jananiya ichha tatra yogyata vivekadi sadhanayutasyaiva na anyasya iti evakara bodhitam artam anvayena vyatirekena cha spashtayati sadhanani iti. So in the 17th verse, we had seen that the four qualifications for commencing upon an inquiry into Brahman were Viveka, Vairagya, Mumukshutvam, and Samadhi Shatka Sampatti. And essentially, he said that those who have these four qualifications are qualified for Brahma Jigyasa. The word Jigyasa essentially means Gyatum Ichha Jigyasa. That is, the one who has the desire to, not the one who has, the desire to know is Jigyasa, and Brahma Jigyasa therefore means the desire to know Brahman. And essentially it said that to have the desire to know Brahman itself, you need to have these four qualifications. And so Acharya is referring to that. He's saying the desire is itself not sufficient. One must fructify that desire into jnana sadhana. And here he had quoted a couple of verses. Dadyan navasaram kinchit kamadina managapi asuptehe amriteh kalam nayed vedanta chintaya and dehatma jnanavad jnanam dehatma jnana badhakam atmanyeva bhavedyasya sanechanapi muchyate. Essentially, he said that the kind of spiritual inquiry, the Vedantic inquiry, Atma Vichara that one must do, is that one must not give a scope for any sort of external desires to creep in. That's what the first verse says. Dadyan na avasaram kinchit kamadina managapi. Not even for the slightest instant, you should allow any external desires to cloud one's inquiry, because one must eternally practice this, constantly practice this Atma Jnana, and any sankalpa towards anything external is actually an obstacle to Atma Jnana. So here actually the Acharya's life itself is an example, we had said. And one example is that once upon a time in Sringeri, there was a question that was asked of Acharya, Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal. There was a corpus that was being provided by the Maharaja of Mysore for whatever activities that the Acharya desired to perform. So there was a general corpus for the Mutt's activities, and separate to that there was a small fund for what doing anything special that the Acharya desires. And Acharya being Sadatma Jnana Niratam, he was constantly focused on Atma Jnana, and therefore he was not interested in any special activity that he wanted to do. So that coffers kept building up. So the administrators from the Mysore Samsthanam approached the Matham and said, please can you ask the Acharya, the Jagadguru, what he wants to do, whether he has any desire. And so the administrator of the Mutt approaches Acharya and he asked him, sir, this has been built up, could you please advise us? And the Jagadguru says, no, I'm not interested in anything. You can do, you should not ask me these things, you should do whatever you want to do. I mean, that's why you have been appointed as an administrator to take care of administration. Don't involve me in these things. But then they insisted upon it, and Acharya said, okay, let us do Rudra Japam, and then let us do Brahmana Bhojanam, etc., and let's do that. So they were very overjoyed that Acharya has given such an agya. He has expressed his desire for something else. And so they went and performed this activity, and Acharya, as usual, continued in his Atma Vichara. And then they came back to report it to him that this is what has happened, so many people have been fed, and what you have said has been accomplished. And then Acharya turned to the administrator, I think it was Srikanta Shastri, and said, "Thank you very much." And so Srikanta Shastri asked, "Why are you thanking me, Acharya? Because essentially that is my job. You don't have to thank me for this." He said, No, I'm not thanking you for you doing your job. I'm thanking you because you have reminded me of something. So when you told me that you have done what I have asked you to, and that it was successful and so many people were fed, etc., it created a small happiness, a small thought of happiness within me, a sukha vritti it created. And then immediately I became aware of that vritti. I also became aware that there was things that were external to me that were still capable of giving me happiness and sorrow. And therefore, I'm thanking you for reminding me of what further effort I need to put in diverting my mind away from anatma and to focus on the atma. So, so when Acharya writes that one must asuptehe amruteh kalam nayed vedanta chintaya, he is a living embodiment of that. He is actually has done that. And Acharya's life itself is an example of how all his time was devoted towards Atma Vichara, and that is what is expected and required to achieve this. And so he says, the etadrisha vichara janani. So that kind of a tibra vichara must be preceded by a desire for moksha, which is that tibram also. And in order to get that yogyata or qualification for it, it is only possible for somebody who has a great degree of chitta shuddhi. And here he is defining that as an individual who is endowed with vivekadi sadhana. Vivekadi sadhana vitasyaiva tatra yogyata asti. And so, and he says, na anyasya, and not anyone else. It's only such an individual who has such a tivra vivekadi sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. Only such an individual will have the desire, and then the desire will fructify into the vichara of the same level of intensity. And that he says, Jagadguru Shankaracharya is going to establish that using the logic of Anvaya and Vyatireka. Meaning, Anvaya means supporting logic and Vyatireka means the opposing logic. That is the logic of co-presence and co-absence. The term Anvaya Vyatireka will constantly appear in Shastra. So it's worth understanding that a little bit. So essentially what he's saying, to take the example in question itself, he's saying the one who has sadhana chatushtaya sampatti will have the yogyata for atma vichara. So that is anvaya logic. That is the presence of sadhana chatushtaya sampatti is the qualification for atma vichara. And that is co-presence logic, anvaya logic. Vyatireka logic is he who does not have the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti is not qualified for atma vichara. And so that is called the Vyatireka logic or the negative logic. So you have both the Anvaya logic and the Vyatireka logic, and with that it's established that only such a person who has sadhana chatushtaya sampatti can do atma vichara, not someone else. And that is what is being clarified in the next verse, verse number 18. So this is the introduction to verse number 18, which begins with the words sadhanani. So we will read that verse now. साधनान्यत्र चत्वारि कथितानि मनीषिभिः येषु सत्स्वेव सन्निष्ठा यतभावेन सिद्ध्यति. So this is the clarification of the Anvaya and Vyatireka logic for Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti and Atma Vichara. It is relatively simple. Essentially it says there are four qualifications that have been mentioned by the Manishibihi, meaning by the wise people, Yeshu satsveva sannishta. So only for those people who have the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, only those people will be able to have atma jnana and atma nishtha, the abidance in that knowledge that one has. And those who don't have the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, that atma jnana and atma nishtha will not be able, they will not be able to achieve it. So it is a relatively simple verse, and therefore we will jump straight into the commentary by Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal. So Acharya is going to use the language of Tarka in this commentary. So let us start reading it. Loke yasya tavate karyatvena abhimata samanadikaranatyantabhav pratyogitvam स्वस्वमानाधिकरणत्यन्ताभाव प्रतियोगी कार्यत्वाभिमतकत्वं वा तस्य तत्कारणत्वं न संभवति. So this is classic Tarka language. And essentially, to put it very simply, what this means is that both the material cause of a thing and its effect will exist in the same location. Now, suppose there are two objects, like say a pot and clay. So, where the pot is present, clay is also present. And where the clay is absent, the pot cannot be present also. The pot will also be absent. So, the presence of the effect implies that the cause, the material with which the effect is made is also present there. So, very simply, when the pot is there, the clay also must be there. Without the clay, how can the pot exist? Is what we are saying here. So, here he is saying, Karyatvena abhimata samanadhikarana atyantabhava pratyogitvam tas karanatvam na sambhavati. So, if we have a pot and say threads, okay, so you use thread to make a cloth. Now, he is saying in the location where the pot is present, the pot is considered to be the effect of clay. Okay, and the same location, is the thread present? No, because there is no requirement that the thread should be present, because the thread is not the cause of the pot. The clay is the cause of the pot. So where the pot is present, there is the absence of thread, and therefore it follows that the thread is not the cause of the pot. So he's saying karyatvena abhimata. That means that object which is considered to be an effect, samanadhikarana, in the locus or the location of that effect, location of the pot, atyantabhava pratyogitvam. If an object is absent in the location of the effect, then it follows that that object is not the cause of the effect. Tat karanatvam na sambhavati. Tasya tat karanatvam na sambhavati. Such an object. So, by tasya, let us take thread. Tat, let's take the effect pot. So, karyatvena ghataha, ghata samanadhikarana, the locus of the pot, the absence of the thread is present. So the thread need not be present where the pot is present. Therefore, it follows that the thread is not the cause of the pot. And he explains it the other way also. So he says, Swasamanadhikarana atyantabhava pratyogi karyatvabhimatakatvam tasya tatkaranatvam na sambhavati. Where the object is absent, if something else is present, it follows that the object is not the cause of that thing. So, where the thread is not present, if the pot is present, it follows that the thread is not the cause of the pot. It's as simple as that. Essentially, what he's trying to say, he's trying to compare the existence of the cause and the existence of the effect. And he says the cause will necessarily be present where the effect is present, and if the cause is absent, then the effect is also absent. And therefore, if something is absent and something else is present, it follows that object 1 cannot be the cause of object 2. It's as simple as that. Anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying that the cause will always be present wherever the effect is present. So he gives an example. The same example that we talked about. Yatha pata samanadikarana atyantabhava pratyogini mrit मृत् समानाधिकरण अत्यंताभाव प्रतियोगी पटवती वा सा पटकारणत्वं नाश्मते. That is, so we had looked at the pot and the thread. He takes the other thing. He looks at the cloth and clay. So he says, where the cloth is present, the absence of clay is there. And where the clay is absent, the cloth is present. Therefore, it follows that clay is not the cause for the material cause for the cloth. Apitu mritsatve ghatasatvam mridabhave ghatabhavah iti अन्वय व्यतिरेक सहचार ग्रहवशात् घटकारणत्वं bhajate. But rather, when the clay is present, Mrit Sattve, Ghata Sattvam, the pot is present. The pot's presence implies that the clay is there. So, Mrit Sattve, Ghata Sattvam. When the clay is absent, the pot will necessarily be absent. Mridabhave Ghata Bhavaha iti Anvaya Vyatirika Sahachara Grahavashat. So, here he is saying the Mrit Sattve, Ghata Sattvam is Anvaya logic, the supporting logic. Mridabhave Ghatabhavaha is Vyatireka logic, and therefore, because the necessary concomitance or co-presence of Mrit and Ghata and the necessary co-absence of Mrit and Ghata, so where the clay is absent, the pot is also absent, implies that the clay is the cause of the pot. It's as simple as that. He's trying to establish yat sattve yat sattam yadabhave yadabhavaha tat tasya karanam uchyate. So essentially he is just trying to establish that thing. It's a very a simple thing, but it is said in a very precise technical language in Tarka, so it appears to be very complicated, but it is not. Evam vivekadi chatushtaya sattve eva sati brahmani nitaram sthiti prayojaka brahma jignasayaha sambhavat तदभावे च असंभवात् अन्वय व्यतिरेक सहचार ग्रहाधीना तेषां विवेकादीनां सन्निष्ठापरपर्याय फलपर्यन्त ब्रह्मजिज्ञासा कारणत्वावगतिः इत्युक्तम्. So here he is saying in a similar manner to the clay and the pot, vivekadi chatushtaya sattva eva, only when the vivekadi chatushtaya sadhana chatushtaya sampatti is present, ब्रह्मणि नितराम स्थिति प्रयोजक ब्रह्म जिज्ञायाः संभवात्. So the state of constantly abiding in Brahmani nitaram sthiti can be achieved only when the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti is present. And he says that what is the cause for the constant abidance in Brahman? He is saying the Brahma jignasa. So the desire that culminates in a constant abidance in Brahman is only possible when the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti is present. Tadabhave cha asambhavat. When the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti is absent, then such a desire itself will not be present. Brahma jignasa itself will not be present. Therefore, he says, Anmaya Vyatireka Sahachara Grahadhinam Tesham Vivekadinam Sannishta Paraparyaya Phalaparyanta Brahma Jignasa Karanatva Avagatihi Ityuktam. So, because when there is Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, there will be Brahma Jignasa, and when there is no Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, there will be no Brahma Jignasa. The result of Brahmanishtha will only accrue as a result of Brahma Jignasa when Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti is present and not when it is not present. So he's saying that the ultimate goal of Brahmanishtha is only possible when sadhana chatushtaya sampatti is present. That is all this means. So it is not a complicated thing at all. One should not get worried when they see very, very complex logic in logical usage. The reason why complex logic is used is not to complicate matters, but to state things in a manner which can never be open to interpretation. So nobody can twist your words because it is being used in a very, very technical and a precise manner. But the problem is, if one is not familiar with the Nyaya terminology, one will get confused and may not understand what is being talked about. But the subject matter is relatively simple. I'm not saying it is easy, but it is simple to understand. It may be difficult to put in practice. So essentially, what he's saying is that in order for Brahmanishtha to occur, Brahma Jigyasa should be there. And the for Brahma Jigyasa to be there should be Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti. Therefore, for the Brahma Jigyasa to lead to a result like Brahmanishtha, it needs to have Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, like Viveka, etc. Now, then he takes the next quarter of the verse, Katitani Manishibihi. So it has been said by the wise people. So what does this wise people mean? Acharya says, Tatra Manishatvam cha Shruti Tatparya Jnanavatvam. Now, by saying wise people, we are referring to those individuals who understand the Tatparya of Shruti. Now, there are various Acharyas and different Sampradayas, all of them who claim to be Vedantists. There is Dvaita Vedanta, there is Vishishtadvaitam, there is Advaitam. But all three cannot be correct. Unfortunately, there are not multiple paths. Now, we are not saying that we are not saying that Vishishtadvaitam and Dvaitam do not have a utility or they are not useful. We are not saying that. But we are saying that we cannot accept that to be the ultimate Tatparya of the Shruti, and the ultimate Tatparya of Shruti lies in Advaita Vedanta alone. And those individuals who understand the principles of interpretation, because when we are looking at the Vedic text, there is no author for it whom we can go back and consult. We cannot go back and see, is the writer of the Veda an Advaitin, a Vishishtadvaitin, or Advaitin? We cannot do that because it is not composed or it is not coming from a human origin. It is Apaurusheyam. It has no human origin at all. And therefore, we are talking about the nature of reality. And that nature of reality, you cannot have options. So, when you're talking about whether a pot is black or white, there are no two things about it. It can either be black or it can be white. It cannot be both. Similarly, when we are talking about the ultimate Tatparya of Shruti and whether it lies in Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita or Advaita, we have to determine based on the hermeneutical principles or the principles of interpretation of Vedic texts that have been laid out in Mimamsa. So the entire purpose of the Brahma Sutra is to establish how to interpret the Vedas and determine what is the final import or Tatparyam. What is the Shruti's intention? The determination of that is what is the purpose of Brahma Sutra, and that is the purpose of Shastra in general. And what Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal is saying here is that by Manishitvam, what Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pada is referring to is he is talking about those people who have applied the principles of Mimamsa to understand what is the Tatparya of Shastra. And it's only once we understand the Tatparya of Shastra will we then be able to get the knowledge, because we are talking about Shabda Pramana. And so when we are looking at a particular object, we do not have to consider what is the intention of the eye. The eye has to simply look at that object and will immediately see. But when we are talking about Shabda Pramana or verbal testimony, we have to understand what is the intention of the text, what is it trying to convey. And once we understand the intention of the text, we will then be able to interpret and understand the exact subject matter of the text better. So by saying Manishi or Manishitvam or the quality of wisdom or those people who are wise, we are referring to the those individuals who have the knowledge of what is the final import or Paramatatparyam or Shruti. So why is wisdom being defined in the context of understanding the import of Shrutis? Acharya says, Shruti avalambana bhave etadrisha adhikari visheshananam durgyanatvat. The importance or the significance of these kinds of virtues, that is the Viveka, Vairagya, etc., one will not be able to appreciate its importance or significance without resorting to or depending upon the Shruti. Shruti avalambana bhave. If you do not accept Shruti Pramana, one will not be able to understand what is the necessity for Viveka, Vairagya, etc. You will say, even without that, why cannot I be an adhikari? One question will be asked. So the Shruti will give you the reasons as to why that is important, Acharya is saying. Tadrishashcha Manishinah Badarayana Prabhritayah. So by that, we, as I said, the Brahma Sutra's purpose is to reveal what is the Paramatatparya of the Shruti, what is the ultimate message that the Shruti is trying to convey. And the author of that is Badarayana Vyasacharya, and Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal is saying that by Manishibihi we are referring to great sages such as Badarayana, etc. ते किल अथातो ब्रह्मजिज्ञासा इति सूत्रघट अथशब्देन साधनचतुष्टयसम्पत्त्यानन्तर्यं सूत्रयन्तः ब्रह्मजिज्ञासादिकरणम् एवं विधं सूत्रयामासुः इति शारीरकमीमांसादि अधिकरणतृतीयवर्णकभाष्यादर्थः अवगम्यते. So Acharya is quoting the first sutra of the Brahma Sutra, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Essentially, it comprises of Atha, Ataha, Brahma Jigyasa. Now, therefore, the desire to know Brahman or the inquiry into Brahman. So, what he is saying here is that it was Badarana Acharya who explained first through the use of the word Atha. The word Atha in the Brahma Sutra conveys, it means now. So when you say now, the natural question is after what? So what is it that you are saying? Now means that something must have happened. And so Shankaracharya in the third discussion that happens in the Brahma Jigyasa Adhikaranam, he says that the word Atha refers to the presence of sadhana chatushtaya sampatti as a prerequisite to commence Brahma Jigyasa or an inquiry into Brahman, or the desire to know Brahman must be preceded by the presence of sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. That's what he's saying. So, Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal is saying that the intention of Adi Shankaracharya in this verse is to remind one of what Badarayana had said in the Brahma Sutra. And so when he says that the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti must be present for Brahma Jigyasa, so say the wise people. What Shankaracharya is trying to say is that by wise people is referring to sages like Badarayana Acharya, who in their Brahma Sutra have said that the enquiry into Brahman must be preceded by the presence of the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. And that is what the intention here is. So with that, we will briefly conclude today's session, and we will take up the rest of the commentary, because the rest of the commentary is another topic, so it will go into a longer discussion. We'll take it up in the next session. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.